Douglass's Women is the fictional retelling of the life of an American hero, Frederick Douglass, told through the eyes of the two women who loved him, his wife and his mistress. Anna Douglass, a free woman of color, was his wife of 44 years who bore him 5 children. Ottilie Singh, a German Jewish fan of his, provided him the intellectual companionship that he craved. Author Jewell Parker Rhodes vividly portrays the life they led together under the same roof, filled with passions and resentments. Hello and welcome to The Best Book Ever, the podcast where we get to know interesting people by asking them about their favorite book. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Piper Huguley, the author of one of my favorite books of the year, called By Her Own Design, a novel of Anne Lowe, fashion designer to the social register. Piper is also a professor of American literature and the author of several historical romances. We had a great time talking about why Piper thinks historical fiction gets butts into chairs of history classes, why it's important to learn about the wives of the great men of history, and why a complete picture of a respected icon like Frederick Douglass enhances rather than diminishes our understanding of him. Good morning, Piper. Welcome to the Best Book Ever podcast.
Thank you for having me, Julie. I appreciate it.
I have to sit on my hands today because I'm super, super excited to talk to you, and I have to try to act calm and not fangirl out. I have followed you for a very long time as a romance author, but you recently debuted your first historical fiction.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Will you tell my listeners about your book, By Her Own Design?
By Her Own Design is a historical fiction novel. It's what technically is called a biographical historical fiction novel that follows the life of Anne Lowe, who was a Black fashion designer who's best known for designing Jacqueline Bouvier Jackie Kennedy's wedding gown in 1953. That is what she's best known for. And the book is about her climb from being born in very rural Clayton, Alabama in 1898 to being a fashion designer to the haute couture. She designed gowns for the wealthiest people in the United States, DuPonts, Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, Roosevelts, and the Auchincloss clan, which is how she came in contact with Jackie, and that's who she was. So it's quite a story about her transformation from, I say, very rural. If you've ever been to Eastern Alabama, then you would know.
Really,
and it's not New York City.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
How did you learn about her?
Well, I always had known about her in the back of my mind. Partly, in fact, due to me knowing about Black history, partly because I've always been a Kennedy aficionado. But it was actually Twitter when my editor, who I had also known from some romance conventions, etc. I'd never pitched her, but we just came to know one another. And she retweeted an article saying, will someone please write me this novel?
And you said, challenge accepted.
I read the article that she did, and then I went and looked on the internet to see what else was out there. And I knew instantly, I was like, okay, this is a novel. And I'd been working on a historical novel of some other people. But I said, this would enable me to get a foot into the door to starting what I call phase 2 of my writing career. So I was like, yes, I'm on it. I let my agent know, and I wrote up the prologue. The prologue was practically just came to me as it was, and sent it off to her in order to be able to say, this is it. I'm the one. Don't let anybody else.
No one else gets her.
No one else gets her. So.
Committing to a book about someone is a big deal. It's a long-term commitment. So what about her life? I mean, there must have been a point where you said, am I willing to live with this woman for the next however long it takes me to write, but also for the rest of your life? You're going to be answering questions about this book for the rest of your life. So what about her interested you the most that made you say, I'm ready to give my all for this one?
her determination, for one thing, in pursuit of her dream, I thought was very inspirational. Also, the fact that for me, this part 2 is about uplifting these unsung Black women, and partly me being a little pissed off at the fact that people don't know that I didn't even know, someone who's supposedly an expert in Black history because I teach it, didn't know enough about her for her to at least be included in the conversation every February and now March. I mean, and so to me, this was the fact of this woman needs to be uplifted. She needs to be talked about. She needs her exhibit. She needs the comprehensive scholarly biography. And I've always believed in the power of historical fiction to do what I call putting butts in seats in history classes, to get people intrigued enough. Maybe someone out there would do that work. And there will be an exhibit next year at the Winter Fair in Delaware. So that's one thing that's ticked off. But the other thing with that comprehensive scholarly biography of an artist, that's the next thing that I hope will happen.
Were you already a fashion person, or did you understand the workings of high fashion, or was this something that you had to learn as you started working on this?
I am the nerdy child of 2 fashionistas.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and my mother was also someone who sewed. I cannot sew a lick. I had all of that in my background, which was another thing that let me know, yeah, I could do this. This is what I'm supposed to do. So, where
is Jackie Kennedy's dress now?
It is held back, from display now. The Kennedy JFK Library in Boston. What is on display is a paper duplicate that an artist did some years ago. So it is not on display. Part of the reason why it is not on display, of course, it's fragile among Anne Lowe gowns or whatever, amongst the other ones that are on display, which 4 of them are on display at the Met right now. But this gown is made of 50 yards of ivory silk taffeta, and have it hanging would further damage it. It's really the kind of thing that if it's going to be seen, it should be laid out on a table. So they took it off display and commissioned an artist to do this paper recreation. And apparently a recreation is part of what's going to be happening next year for the exhibit in Delaware, because the exhibit is in part to commemorate Jackie and Jack's 70th wedding anniversary.
I've been thinking about that, about fashion. I'm not a child of fashionistas. I don't know anything about particularly high fashion, but I've been thinking a lot about fashion as art ever since the whole Kim K wearing Marilyn's dress. And I've really been turning it over. What do we do with fashion as art, particularly when it comes to women like Anne Lowe, who do not have the exposure that they should have? Is it more important that we preserve it at all costs, or is it more important that we display it and show people? And I honestly don't know the right answer to that. What do you think of that?
Well, I think we can do both. And I honestly think the Kim Kardashian thing was about money and getting people to come to the museum and not telling celebrities no. I mean, there's all of that that's wrapped up into that sad travesty. But I call Anne Lowe an artist because every one of her designs were custom made for that person. It was even said that a woman could come to the shop without undergarments on. She would build the undergarments into the gown because the line and the way that impacted the way the dress fit and everything was all part of her craft. So just those things. Or the other dress that she's most famous for is the gown that Olivia de Havilland wore when she won her first Oscar in 1947.
Okay.
That I believe, after looking around a bit, kind of began to herald the strapless gown era. We take strapless gowns for granted anymore, especially bridal. But in 1947, this was still a relatively new thing. It was very fashion forward. And for people who go and Google it, which I hope you do, you'll see that the gown has a floral painting from the top of the dress at the bust line all the way down to the bottom, which she did by hand. She did not stencil that floral painting on. So she's an artist. This is all she wanted to do, was to do these dresses for these women. So the dresses are works of art that are artifacts. For me, that was part of the research process in order to be able to take a look at them.
I never knew her name, but I, like most history that I learned, I had always heard, did you know her dress was designed by a Black woman? Isn't that interesting? And that was the most I ever heard.
And that was it. Mm-hmm. No name.
No name. And no story of that. And that's the why would that have happened? That is interesting, is how it got there. But of course, until your book, I never heard that.
Someone said to me as I was promoting, said, people just think, oh, it's just some Black woman making dresses.
When you say it that way, did you know a Black woman did her dresses?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds, that's exactly how it sounds. Like the dress came out of Jackie Kennedy and some Black woman just sewed it. And that's not at all what happened.
Mm-mm. And even even one of the most famous Jackie bios, Oh Jackie by Kitty Kelly, she's the family seamstress. She has no name. And that, first of all, she was, like I said, these women who were wealthy, she had been designing for them for decades. She had gotten a commission to do Jackie's mother's second wedding outfit. That's how she came to the family, and designed the dresses that where Jackie was Deb of the Year in 1947, where her sister was Deb of the Year 4 years later. She had an ongoing relationship with this family. She was not just some seamstress.
And isn't it fascinating that when we look on the women who we consider fashion icons, we put the credit on them.
Mm-hmm.
When what you're telling me is essentially Jackie Kennedy and her sister and mother probably walked in there in the nude, and Ann Lowe went, here's what I'm going to do. But we give the credit to the person wearing the dress.
Unless they say, oh, so-and-so did this, which is part of the process. But if you don't get that someone to say Ann Lowe, then it just, the silence is almost the same, as just completely erasing her. Not saying means that she doesn't get more commissions and people are not asking her to do things and ensuing difficulty.
And a white woman taking the credit for the beauty of the gown when really she just has the bone structure.
Yeah. But she didn't like the dress, so that was all in there too. That was also not Ann Lowe's fault, but that also was in there as well.
Oh God, I love a drama. We're into that messy reality drama.
Yeah, all this stuff about, well, she should have done what, and the whole notion of bridezilla is a relatively recent phenomenon, and that was part of the challenge in portraying Jackie, not as Jackie, the global icon, but who she was before that. And who she was before that, even at 23, 24 years old, was still this relatively sheltered, shy, not able to speak up for herself kind of person who could be manipulated.
And Ann Lowe saw that?
Well, not Ann Lowe saw that, but people who have questions about why didn't Ann Lowe do what Jackie wanted, this whole notion of what Jackie wanted. The wedding was meant to be a coronation for JFK. There were 800 guests at the church and 1,200 guests, the entire United States Senate,
my God.
and their wives at the church, and then 1,200 at Hammersmith Farm for the reception. This was a coronation that Joe Kennedy was putting on and paying for.
Yeah.
And, some dress that was more in line with a more sleek, sophisticated Parisian kind of dress was not in the offing when the whole aspect was, this wedding is big, your dress needs to be big. And that's who was paying. So that's what Jackie got.
I see. Now, are you a big historical fiction reader?
Oh, yeah.
Is that your preferred genre?
It is. It is. I should say for me to know the market.
Were you always a reader?
Yes. From the time I actually apparently learned when I was 3.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And ruined my eyesight in subsequent years. When I'm supposed to be in bed, I'm in the hallway, my parents' bedroom light, trying to read that way. It's always been a thing for me. Even though it's my sister's birthday, the thing my parents would do would be to get me a book so I wouldn't be jealous. Like, oh, happy birthday, sister. I'm going off and reading my book.
Does that still happen? Do you get a book on your sister's birthday?
Yep. Yep. I was slow. May 5th. I'm getting the one that I want, something that might have been on the fringes. Maybe I wasn't approved for it on NetGalley. Now, since I have that kind of entree, I'll go ahead and treat myself.
You know what? Today is my sister's birthday. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna go buy myself a book. I think that is an excellent tradition.
I guess something must have started it, in terms of like, why is she acting all strangely? It's because it's her sister's birthday. I'll give her a book.
Let's just quiet her down.
Yeah, exactly.
I like this tradition. I'm not kidding. As soon as I hang up with you, I'm going to call my sister and say, happy birthday. I'm going to buy myself a book. Do you remember how you found this book that we're talking about today, Douglas's Women?
I don't. I know I was in graduate school and, I'm always doing the reading I'm supposed to be doing. But I never stopped, doing outside reading. Mm-hmm. So, no, I don't remember how I came across Douglas's Women, but I was so glad that I did. I am an English literature professor, United States literature.
Okay.
So, my time period that I do teach literature in is like from Civil War to Civil Rights, as some people call that, 100 years or so. But increasingly, I've had to teach history to my students in order for them to get the understanding of the literature. So over the years, more and more of my historical study got folded into that. It was also thankfully part of my program on the way to the PhD. And it was always there as a little seed. I think I said my mother was a seamstress. So I was always something historical for Halloween. Betsy Ross or a pilgrim. There was this one pattern she was able to transform into several of these historical things.
So then before you actually read this book, did you have a strong grip on Frederick Douglass? Did you have a real sense of his history outside of his writing?
I did. In terms of Frederick Douglass as the man, as the most famous Black man of the 19th century, I did. But in terms of the backdrop of his personal life, especially because in the text that always gets taught, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, his first of 3 autobiographies, he does that on purpose. He draws a veil down over his personal life, very much in line with the Victorian sensibility of when you marry, that woman is of your flesh. So it is perfectly appropriate to not say anything, not reveal anything about her.
Tell our listeners what this book is about, Douglas's Women.
Douglas's Women by Jewell Parker Rhodes is, I believe, the book that launched a genre that I call wife of stories that subsequently after this book, I'm still looking for somebody before this book, but after this book launched many other historical fiction novels that told from the point of view of the wives of great men. Douglas's women, which is plural, I'm not mispronouncing it, is a dual timeline. Also, another thing that got folded into historical fiction as a genre. Dual timeline between Frederick Douglass's wife and his mistress, his Black wife, Anna, and his white mistress, Ottilie Atheling. Yeah, an early example of that. I think the best example of it, which is why I picked it for best book ever.
Tell me what you like about it.
Really, Anna Douglas, for those who don't know, was a free woman. Douglas met her when he was enslaved in Baltimore. She was older than he was, but she was illiterate. And one of the ongoing things about Frederick Douglass was his passion for literacy, the lengths that he went to become literate. But Anna was responsible for his liberation. Frederick Douglass, when he ran away taking 2 trains and a boat. Part of the ruse was that he was a sailor. She sewed him the suit, and he wrote out the passes that enabled him to get from Baltimore to New York, initially, to freedom. And she went there and met him, and they married. Ottilie Atheling was someone whom he met while he was on tour in Europe promoting his autobiography. A groupie, as it were. So I always have this thing when I talk to my students about Frederick Douglass. I say Freddie was a rock star. Help them understand. There were groupies.
Yeah, what a perfect way to describe it.
Many groupies backstage there. And to get them to understand, is one of the most photographed men of the 19th century, and fine as all get out.
Oh, yeah.
With that deep voice. I personally am a sucker for voice. So that would have been it for me. But, to get people to understand that he had this great magnetism. And what Rhodes does so well is especially portray that inner life of Anna, who has so many other qualities to recommend her and uplift her, and the way that Douglas uses her. Again, part of my ongoing saga to uplift Black women, this is one of the reasons why this book just struck such a deep and resonant chord within me. And she's equally able to portray Ottilie Atheling in the obsessed way that she was with Frederick Douglass. So it's a real, in my estimation, masterpiece of the genre.
Does it change your opinion of Frederick Douglass to know this sort of you wouldn't even call it a double life. He didn't lie.
He didn't lie. No. She lives in the house.
Yes, she lives with them.
Down the hall.
That was so crazy.
Yeah. So
did it change how you look at him?
Well, I just say, and I'm someone who's an advocate of a more complete history. Let's tell historical truths of everything. This is part of the problem, I think, with why people think history is boring in classrooms and stuff. It's because what is put forward for us is a very narrowly defined series of dates, great men, all this other kind of stuff that is very curated for us to believe in as some kind of uplifting mythology, which is not the complete history, because a lot of people have been kicked to the side, erased, whitewashed out of it, whatever you want to call it. And Frederick Douglass, even as a Black man, is no exception. To say, every February, here we have this great lion-headed man. We must put up his poster and venerate him. Well, sure, let's do that. But let's talk about him as a man as well, who, married Anna. And so he could purposefully keep her under his feet. I mean, it's just, she was supporting him. It was not even like, he was making the lion's share of the money in conventional 19th century, but he wouldn't have had a home, much less the children, etc., if it was not for Anna, who kept working. The thanks she got for that was to have the mistress move down the hall quite openly. So, I mean, this one thing in terms of the complete history, not meant to tear down somebody, but to just say, this is who this man was. And my students who would sometimes come into 19th century United States literature, where I would teach the narrative for the life of Frederick Douglass, they, start to call it historical tea. You call it tea if you want to. If it engages you, that's great. But, they would start at the beginning of the term, or maybe I'd see them in the hall before, 19th century is boring. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's because you don't know. And this is the thing. We need to know it all. That's my perspective.
I had a funny reaction to it because at first I didn't like her. I didn't like, how do you say her name? Otile?
Otile. Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's not particularly likable. And I just thought, I don't want to sully my opinion of him. But then by the end, I like that he's very complex and very sexual and very flawed. Very flawed. He's human. He was very human now. And it's a funny experience to go through because you kind of feel like, oh no, I don't want to ruin this.
Oh yeah, I've had people like get up and leave the table or something like that from talking about it. It's like they don't want their little mythology ruined with the truth.
But he's fascinating, and it makes him rounded.
I mean, where is his Netflix show? Okay.
Oh, that's what I want to know. Kidding.
Okay. All of these years. Where is that miniseries?
Oh my God. Can you imagine? It would be so great.
I totally can imagine. And the fact that it's not been done yet is a travesty to me. I don't understand it.
Because it is high drama.
Very high drama.
And the stakes are really, really high in his life.
Yes. In a 19th century country where the Bible is the foremost text, he's a Black man going out here trying to convince the population of this great wrong in terms of enslavement. And this is his background. And I mean, it's just like the parallels.
A thing that I love is that Anna refused to learn how to read.
I know, me too.
Okay.
And isn't that the thing we're up here talking about, best books ever and reading and all this stuff? I mean, the ones with things like, when Frederick says to her, Anna, why won't you learn how to read? Why not? If you do it for me, Anna, blah, blah. And she's like, it isn't always about you. I just loved it.
Well, to me, it was women are going to assert their power. It might be very tiny, but they're going to do it where they can. And this is the same thing. In history books, they say things like his first wife, Anna, was illiterate, and it's just sort of brushed over.
Yep.
And I love that Jewell Parker Rhodes gave her that agency of, no.
Yep.
It wasn't just that she was illiterate. It was that she decided, guess who doesn't get to choose?
Right.
And I love that stubbornness about her.
It's amazing.
Because it's no longer then about lack of intelligence. Any of these things that we can judge her for. And now all of a sudden it's a power thing. And she said, no, guess what? You don't get to tell me what to do when you're bringing your mistress into my house. I like that about her.
And she bought a house. I mean, she's not dumb.
No, right.
That whole aspect in terms of reifying, like I said, her sphere of influence to purchase a home.
Right.
Because he sure was not bringing in the money. Amazing. An amazing woman that, like I said, does the work of restoring this portrayal of Anna to history. That, again, some other other scholars who are interested, who will do it, will go back and provide that more in-depth, complex reality in terms of a scholarly biography about a woman who was not a slave. And I said, her choice. But enslavement is all about taking away all of your choices. Mm-hmm. So she was letting him know, you tried it to put me in this kind of situation where you think I'm enslaved, which is what is so fascinating about what he's doing. But I have this choice. I'm not going to let her read. So there, how you like that, Fred?
Okay, so my next question for you is, do you think this is a love story?
No. Historical fiction, that's not one of the requirements. And I think part of this, in terms of if historical fiction is about beginning to restore these people who should be part of the history back into the history, then, more than likely, it's not going to end up like that. So.
It felt like it could have been, though, right? Like both of these women loved him very hard. Mm-hmm. O'Teal in a very clingy, yucky way. But but if Douglas could have loved Anna back, it could have been a magnificent love story.
I didn't love anybody but himself. And then of what subsequently happens.
When he marries a white woman?
When he marries some other. Yeah.
A very young one. I think that's...
He gets a new fresh one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am always side-eyeing the men who go for young women. Always.
Mm-hmm. And those pictures of not just her, but with her sister there too. I always have had questions about that. Nobody want to go there, but I don't know. Was there some poly activity going on? I don't know.
Oh, this is historical tea.
I'm just saying, again, these photographs, there's this one photograph of him between the two sisters. Just saying.
Okay, is that going to be your next book?
Yeah, I'm working on something else.
Can you tell us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, American Daughters is slated to be released next fall. It is about the secret interracial friendship between Portia Washington, the daughter of Booker T. Washington, and Alice Roosevelt, daughter of Theodore Roosevelt. So these two men, president of the United States and Black president of the United States, had these similarly aged eldest daughters. Everybody knows about Alice and how rebellious and stuff she was, etc. But she had a bit of a partner in crime in terms of that. And they struck up their friendship after the horrendous explosion when Theodore, as the new president, after the McKinley assassination, had the nerve to invite Booker T. Washington to dinner at the White House. How dare he? It was a huge story. So in the wake of that, both of these rebellious young women decided to be friends. And yeah, it's quite a story.
Does this book, Douglas's Women, does it influence how you write?
I think so. And I think that when I think about American Daughters and the idea that I think that whole notion of one Black woman, one white woman definitely influenced it. Alice Roosevelt has had historical fiction written about her. But there's, I think, some things that they have not done regarding Alice that I wanted to take a stab at. So,
have you read other books by Jewell Parker Rhodes?
Yes, she wrote another historical fiction book about Marie Laveau that is also very good.
Who's that? Marie
Laveau was a, the larger culture calls it voodoo, but it's actually hoodoo. Great. From New Orleans, etc. In terms of that, so yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I bet that's good.
Yes,
I love finding authors where you read them and you immediately go, "Okay, I'm gonna be a completist for this one."
Yeah. What else is it? Yeah.
What else? So, what are you reading right now? What's on your nightstand?
Right now, I have Sister Mother Warrior by Vanessa Riley.
What is that?
She wrote Island Queen last summer about the mistress to when he wasn't William the Fourth yet, but the Black mistress to her. So that was her book that she wrote last year. But this is about the women behind the Haitian Revolution. So it's about a mother and her daughter-in-law and how they were, working behind the scenes in regards to the Haitian Revolution.
Boy, you really do love those women behind the stories.
I do.
They're so good.
Yes.
Do you think you'll stay in the historical fiction lane for a while, or do you think you'll venture back into romance in your writing career?
Well, I have. And say last year I wrote a contemporary romance called Sweet Tea for Hallmark Publishing. So.
But that was before the Anne Lowe book, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just last year. And my mass market for that was released just yesterday. So I'm really primarily going for the historical fiction type of stuff and with the occasional contemporary romance. That's what the plan is. So.
Love it. I cannot wait to see what you do next. I love your book, and I am just thrilled to have this chance to talk to you. Will you tell our listeners where they can find you and all your work?
My website is Piper Huguley, PiperHuguley.com. I hang out a lot on Twitter, which is at Piper Huguley. I also am on Facebook, which is Piper G. Huguley, and Instagram, which I'm coming to learn more about, which is Piper_Huguley, unless someone else hacks me again. No.
Ugh, I know. I went through that too. It's exhausting.
It's so tiresome.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to hang in there with the Instagram, whatever.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. It has been a delight. I am such a fan of your work, and I hope you will come back anytime you have a book you want to talk to me about, because this has been just great being introduced to this book and talking to you about it.
I would love to, Julie. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me today on the Best Book Ever podcast. Links to all the books we discussed are in the show notes or at my website, bestbookeverpodcast.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Best Book Ever Podcast. If you have a book you want to tell me about, click on the Be a Guest button on my website or Instagram bio so we can chat. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with someone you love and rate it on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. In addition to hosting this podcast, I am also the author of several contemporary romances, and because I contain multitudes, I'm also the co-author of a paranormal werewolf romance, all of which are available wherever you buy your favorite books. Even better, you can request them at your local library. And in case you are wondering, authors do get paid when libraries buy their books, and then you get to read for free. So it is a win-win situation for all of us. Please request the books that we discussed today at your local library so that others can discover them. Thank you, my friends, for joining me today, and I will see you at the library.